Descent is a 3D first-person shooter video game developed by Parallax Software and released by Interplay in Europe in 1994. The game features 6 degrees of freedom gameplay and garnered several expansion packs, as well as a 1996 port to the PlayStation. A Saturn port was also announced, but later cancelled. Descent spawned 2 direct sequels, Descent 2 and Descent 3. On April 10, 2015, a prequel titled Descent: Underground was successfully funded on Kickstarter, raising over $600,000 USD through crowdfunding to bring Descent back to the PC with release expected in March 2016. Gameplay Single player The game requires the player to navigate labyrinthine mines while fighting virus-infected robots. The player is given the clear objective to find and destroy each mine's reactor core and escape before the mine is destroyed by the meltdown. Occasionally, for some levels, the reactor core is replaced with a boss, changing the objective that the player must destroy the boss in order to trigger the meltdown and escape before the mine blows up. To obtain access to the reactor, the player must collect the blue, yellow, and/or red access keys for each level, which are required to open doors. As an optional objective, the player can also choose to rescue PTMC workers who were taken hostage by the infected robots. Descent features a complementary point system. Players can score points by destroying enemy robots, picking up power-ups, and detonating the reactor. Bonus points are awarded upon completion of each level. These bonus points are based upon the player's shield and energy count, the skill level played, and a combination of picking up any hostages and safely rescuing them. Descent demands that players keep their sense of orientation in a fully 3D environment with a flight model featuring 6 degrees of freedom in zero gravity. Traditional FPS games require the player to only control 2 axes and their heading. By employing 6 degrees of movement, the player is given additional control for vertical movement and banking, introducing more movement controls than traditional FPS games. Descent Euro's unique movement controls also increase the possibility for players to experience motion sickness or nausea, a common complaint found in reviews for the game. The player is given the choice to natively use a keyboard, mouse, joystick, or combinations of these devices. Use of a second input device with or without a keyboard provides a greater amount of control due to the additional degrees of movement. The game also supports the use of 2 independently configured joysticks. One of its many supported input methods was mouse look, which at the time had not yet become standard in first-person games. Since mouse look blew everything else away in multiplayer, it either became required to play multiplayer, or banned on some servers. Like Doom, Descent provides a navigational wireframe map that displays any area of the mine visited or seen by the player, which revolves around the player's position. Use of the slide controls allows the player to navigate to areas of the map away from their current location. The use of wireframe models meant that areas at varying distances would appear to mix together when overlapping. This was overcome in Descent 3 with the use of opaque wall brushes and lighting closely matching that found in-game. Additionally, Descent 3's map system allowed the player the ability to move the viewpoint through the tunnels in map mode. Descent features 30 levels, 3 of which are secret levels. Each level was based in a mine located in various locations in the solar system. The first 3 levels begin on the Moon, the next 2 on Venus, and 2 more on Mercury. The 7th level features the game's first boss rather than a reactor, and was the last level of the shareware. In the full version, the player moves on through 20 more mines in an outward pattern from Earth, Mars, Io, Callisto, Ganymede, Europa, Titan, Hyperion, Tethys, Miranda, Oberon, Neptune, Triton, Nereid, Pluto, and the final level and boss fight on Charon. The player accesses the 3 secret levels located in the asteroid belt using alternative exit doors hidden in specific levels. The primary weapons in Descent use energy, with the exception of the Vulcan cannon, which uses traditional ammunition. The player's spacecraft has a maximum energy capacity of 200 units. Energy is replenished from energy power-ups floating in the mines or ejected by destroyed enemies. Energy can also be topped up at energy centers, Permanent recharge locations. Descent uses shield power as health. As with energy, the ship maxes out at 200 shield units. Unlike energy, shields can only be restored by acquiring shield or power-ups. If the player finishes a level with shield power or energy power below 100 units, the ship will be recharged to 100 units for the next level. When the player's ship is destroyed, all acquired power-ups and weapons are strewn about the area as power-ups, and, at a cost of a life, the player's ship is respawned at the original starting position. In multiplayer games, extra shield and energy pickups are also dropped upon death. Multiplayer Descent offers competitive multiplayer gameplay for up to 8 players over LAN and is touted as being one of the first games to allow initiating sessions conveniently from a menu within the game as well as on-the-fly joining of multiplayer games, whereas in many similar games of the era, such as Doom, it is presumed that all players have to be queued prior to initiating the match. With the advent of Internet IPX clients such as Kali and Khan, Descent and Descent 2 were increasingly played over the Internet. Khan, for example, supported game matchmaking for Internet-based gaming on MS-DOS, Windows 95 and Windows 98. Descent 2 was especially popular online due to its support for short packets and variable packet rate, which significantly improved quality of play over the slower Internet connections prevalent at the time. Since then, Descent source ports have added UDP support. Plot: the game begins with a briefing between a bald anonymous executive of the Post-Taram Minerals Corporation and the player, a material defender hired on a mercenary basis to eliminate the threat of a mysterious computer virus infecting the machines and robots used for off-world mining operations. The game progresses through the solar system, from the Moon to Mercury, then outbound towards Pluto's moon Charon. After defeating the boss robot on Charon, the material defender is informed he cannot return to the PTMC's headquarters in Earth orbit, as there is a chance his ship may be infected with the same virus as the defeated robots. His employer also mentions that PTMC has lost contact with their deep space installations outside the solar system, hinting at what is going to happen in the sequel. History Development The original Descent was developed by Parallax Software for DOS and PCs as platform. Like most games of its era, Descent was developed with a software renderer, because mainstream 3D graphics accelerator cards did not exist at the time. However, while most of his contemporaries are Doom included are use sprites, to render enemies, Descent renders enemies in full 3D using polygon meshes, a technique employed by Quake 1 year later. Sprites are used only for power-ups and the hostages. Descent's graphics engine uses portal rendering, taking advantage of the game's use of collections of cubes to form rooms and tunnels, in contrast with Doom and Quake, which use BSP trees. This system was very efficient, and made possible one of the first true 3D textured environments in a video game. On lower-end systems, detail levels could be reduced to cut out some of the smaller polygons on robots and render solid color blocks in place of textures on distant walls and across passageways in the distance. Within the game, sides of cubes can be attached to other cubes, or display up to 2 texture maps. Cubes can be deformed so long as they remain convex. To create effects like doors and see-through grating, walls could be placed at the connected sides of 2 cubes. The game also introduced an elaborate static lighting scheme alongside its simple dynamic lighting, where the environment could be lit with fluorescer another advancement compared to Doom. Descent 2 later added more dynamic lighting effects, including the ability to shoot out light fixtures. The original Descent uses indexed 8-bit color in DOS's display mode 13 hours with a 320x200 resolution. Unlike its sequel, it uses only one 256 color set during gameplay rather than a unique set for each group of levels. These colors tinge red during damage and purple during fusion charging. The Macintosh and later PC versions allow higher resolutions, such as 640x, 480. The default engine uses a software renderer in which the perspective transformation for texture mapping is only performed once every 32 pixels, causing textures to appear to pop or shift when viewed from certain angles. The software renderer also uses nearest neighbor texture filtering, as opposed to bilinear filtering or trilinear filtering used by modern video cards. Nearest neighbor texture filtering causes aliasing artifacts, such as blocky textures. These rendering compromises allowed the game to be played on most PCs contemporary with it, while better rendering techniques would have prevented it from being run on any but the most powerful gaming PCs in 1994. Due to the game's CPU burdening software rendering, the game was playable on 386 CPUs at 33 MHz, and for good quality rendering with full screen view and better than minimal render depth, a 486 running at least 66 MHz was required. With the release of the faster Pentium, the performance requirements were no longer an issue and maximum rendering quality was possible. Releases and ports. Descent was originally released in Europe for MS-DOS in December 1994, and made it to North America on March 17, 1995. Initially it was released by Interplay as shareware, with the full version released 3 months later, just over a year after the December 1993 release of id Software's Doom. On that year came the Mac OS, Acorn Archimedes and PC 9.8 releases as well, respectively exclusive to North America, Europe and Japan. In 1995, a commercial Descent level editor called Descent Mission Builder, created by Brian Armott of Brainware, was published by Interplay Productions. Users can create their own single-player and multiplayer levels with the program and then play them. Later that same year came Descent, Levels of the World, a popular add-on containing all of the entries from a level design competition held by Interplay in 1995. A viewer is included, allowing the player to see a preview of each map, as well as selecting ones that received a top 10 award or an honorable mention. A Sega 32X version of Descent was announced as the first console version, but it was never released. In 1996, Descent Anniversary Edition was released on the 1-year anniversary of the original game's debut. The Anniversary Edition featured Descent, the Levels of the World add-on, and several additional levels created by Parallax. A version of Descent was produced for the PlayStation in 1996. It features 30 levels, with 5 new Anarchy levels, the remixed soundtrack from the Mac OS version, pre-rendered cinematics, and Radiosity-colored lighting effects. In 1997, Descent was bundled with its 1996 sequel Descent 2 and Descent 1 and 2: The Definitive Collection. This included Descent, the Levels of the World add-on, and several additional levels created by Parallax. The various expansions for Descent 2 were also included, as was a preview of the upcoming Descent 3. In February 1997, it was confirmed that Interplay was planning to release the game to the Nintendo 64 in time for the holiday season under the name Ultra Descent, as it had done for the PlayStation the previous year. Throughout the next 2 years it was said that the game was still in development and release dates were scattered all over the place until it was silently cancelled in late 1999. In February 1996, Descent's official support ended with Parallax last patch v1.5. Therefore the game runs fine on PCs using Windows 95, but has compatibility problems with the later released Windows XP. Source code release. In 1997, in the commercial end of life, the source code of the original Descent was released, excluding the audio code, which was later replaced with the Allegro library. The source code to Descent 2 was subsequently released in 1999. Parallax Software released the source code to the original Descent and Descent 2 under the terms of a non-free source code license in which that all commercial or revenue-generating distribution is restricted. The source code availability led to the creation of Descent source ports for modern computer operating systems and hardware by the game's community. Notable examples are DXX Rebirth and D2XXL, as well as a homebrew Wally version. Trademark lapse and sequel plans. The trademark registration for Descent was allowed to lapse by Interplay in 2002 and was re-registered in 2008. In November 2007, Interplay announced that the company had plans to create a new Descent game if it could secure funding for the game's development. Re-releases. Descent was re-released on modern digital distribution services after being non-available for years in retail distribution, GOG.com, on September 9, 2008 and Steam on February 13, 2014, where it has met with high sales. Interplay originally announced that a version of Descent was planned for release on the WiiWare for the holiday season of 2010. However, while not officially cancelled, no progress has been seen in 4 years, and it is now considered abandoned. Reception: Descent was a critical and commercial success. GameSpot gave the PC version an 8 out of 10, remarking that only one 3D shooter adds a whole new dimension to the field, Descent. They particularly noted the labyrinthine environments and free three-dimensional range of movement. The 4 reviewers of Electronic Gaming Monthly called the PlayStation version an outstanding conversion due to its extremely fast rendering speed and improved lighting effects. However, 2 of them felt that the gameplay lacked excitement. They scored it a 7.375 out of 10. GamePro also judged it an excellent conversion due to its complex but generally easy-to-master controls and impressive lighting effects, though they did complain of sometimes severe slowdown. Maximum gave it 4 out of 5 stars, saying it is one of the greatest games to grace the PlayStation, and rates alongside Wipeout as one of the best ambassadors for the machine. He particularly applauded the labyrinthine level design, intelligent enemy AI, and lighting effects. Their subsequent feature on the game was more critical, saying that the official PAL version of Descent features some of the most hideous letterbox PAL borders we've ever seen, with no sign of PAL optimization whatsoever. However, it also praised the game's use of the PlayStation Link-Up cable. UseGamer ran a retrospective feature on the game, saying it combined the genre of spaceflight simulator with a first-person shooter experience. Legacy: In 1997, Interplay released Descent to Undermountain, an RPG that used a modified version of the Descent graphics engine, but that was otherwise unrelated as it took place in a medieval fantasy setting. The popularity of Descent brought about several similar 6 Degrees of Freedom shooters. Perhaps the most well-known Descent clone was Forsaken, which was released in 1998 for PC, PlayStation, and Nintendo 64. Forsaken had similar graphics to Descent, and almost identical gameplay. Descent: Free Space The Great War was released by Volition, Incorporated in 1998. It shared the Descent name, but otherwise had no connection to the series. It was given the Descent prefix to avoid trademark issues. Free Space was a space simulator, and while it was still technically a 3D shooter, it did not retain Descent Euro's characteristic 6 Degrees of Freedom control scheme, save for a cheat code that would force the player's ship to loosely mimic Descent Euro's physics. Some early drafts of the Free Space story had the pilot searching for Descent Euro's material defender, but the story of the finished game was unrelated. Around that time, Volition also began work on Descent 4, but development was cancelled in 2000, owing mostly to disappointing sales of Descent 3. Descent 4 may have been originally planned as a prequel to Descent, and reportedly served as a basis for the first-person shooter Red Faction. Similarities include a reference to a human's first strike in Descent Euro's opening briefing, and plot points such as nanotechnology, an evil faceless corporation, and the virus they are attempting to harness. Mike Cullers stated in an interview that the Red Faction and Descent universes are strictly separate, however he did admit that code intended for Descent 4 had been used in Red Faction. Minor Wars 2081, a 6 Degrees of Freedom game released in 2012, features audio work by Dan Wentz, sound effects editor for Descent 2. In 1999 the Descent series also spawned a trilogy of novels written by Peter Tellep and sold at several major booksellers. The titles are Descent, Descent, Stealing Thunder, and Descent, Equinox. The novels did not follow the games to the word, but expanded on the basic premise, and were very well received. In November 2014, several former developers for the Star Citizen game, led by Eric Vingman Peterson, announced that they were forming Descendant Studios to work on a multiplayer game similar to Descent in play style, and with the working title Ships That Fight Underground. The company was approached by Interplay in December and a deal was struck to license the Descent name to Descendant Studios. In March 2015, Descendant Studios announced a Kickstarter for Descent, Underground, a new prequel using Interplay's existing IP rights to the Descent franchise. It is powered by Unreal Engine 4 and has a planned release date of March 2016. References. External links: Descent at Moby Games, official Descent page at Interplay, Descent source code, Descent port on Wybrew.